If you know anything about the Kia EV9, you likely know that it won the prestigious 2024 Drive Car of the Year award. The spec that won that was the entry-level variant, the EV9 Air, which the judges loved for, amongst other reasons, the fantastic amount of tech and safety. However, one negative they called out was the price. At nearly 100 grand, even the entry-level variant is quite unreachable for a lot of Australian families. So today, I'm in the mid-spec variant, the EV9 Earth, and this costs $106,500 before on-road costs. So at nearly 10k more, what does the Earth have that the Air hasn't? And does that make it a more worthwhile purchase? Stick with me to find out. There's less than 10k difference between the price of the Air and the price of the Earth. Not so crazy in the grand scheme of things, but it does take us over the $100,000 mark. So here's where the Earth differs from the Air. The EV9 Earth is a dual motor all-wheel drive compared to the Air's single motor rear-wheel drive. The Earth has a 99.8 kilowatt-hour battery pack and an increased range of 512 kilometres compared to the Air's 443 kilometres. Important to point out is that the Earth has the greatest range of all three models. The top spec GT line has a 505km range, although it can boast a faster 0 to 100 km/h acceleration time of 5.3 seconds. Meanwhile, the Earth goes from 0 to 100 km in 6 seconds, a 2-second advancement on the Air. The Earth and the GT line are pretty much on par when it comes to battery and power, so it's just the equipment list that differs between them. Amongst other things, the GT line offers a tinted sunroof, roof rails, a head-up display and 21-inch wheels. And just as well it can boast these luxuries. The GT line starts at $121,000, $15,000 more than the Earth. The EV9 comes with a huge laundry list of equipment as standard, including, but certainly not limited to, LED projector headlights, daytime running lights and tail lights, and 19-inch alloy wheels. And that's just the half of it. So first things first, let's talk looks. You don't have to be a genius to work out it is a huge car. It's nearly 5 metres long and 2 metres wide. It's not exactly a wallflower on the roads, and Kia has really led into that. I personally think a car of this size really suits this big, angular, boxy look. And of course there are lots of those futuristic elements that really lend themselves to an EV. In the interior, you've got a 12.3-inch infotainment touchscreen, a 12.3-inch driver information display and 5-inch temperature control panel between the two. There is a wireless phone charger, 5 USB-C ports, 2 12-volt power sockets and an 8-speaker audio system. You also receive heated and ventilated seats, a heated steering wheel and noise-suppressing windscreen and side glass. So as you can see, inside the car is huge, which is exactly what you need to make sure that all 7 potential passengers are riding in comfort. Right, there's a lot to get through, so let's start here at the front. So here in the front is where you can see I'm really swimming in swathes of space. I'm practically having to shout at my passenger. In between the infotainment screen and the driver's display, you've got this 5-inch temperature control panel. But what's a bit frustrating about that is that it's eclipsed by the steering wheel. So it's a little bit hard to access when you're on the road. Fortunately, there is a series of physical buttons below the infotainment screen here that I can use to control my temperature and that of my passengers. There is dual zone climate control here in the front. And this thumb wheel in the centre here and on the steering wheel make it easy to play with volume whilst driving. This car does support both Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. I've been relying mostly on a wireless connection, but if you do want to plug in, there's plenty of USB ports down here. Now, in my experience in the car, I have found that the wireless connection has dropped out a couple of times, and I've also found it takes a couple of seconds longer to establish a connection than I'm used to in other cars. Having said that, if you want to rely on the navigation or the radio that's already embedded in the Kia system, then the graphics are great and it's very functional and easy to use. Any technical updates to Kia's internal software can be made wirelessly in real time via over-the-air updates. In the Earth, I have an 8-speaker audio system, whilst the top of the range GT line has a 14-speaker Meridian audio system. So this tray in the central storage unit isn't particularly deep, and we've also noticed that the door bins aren't particularly big either, but I can hardly complain about that when I have got so much space and storage around me. I've got these 2 cup holders here, and I've actually got this tray below me by my feet here, which are good for bags, laptops, what have you. And then the other thing is a pretty massive glove compartment. Look, for all of its cool gadgets and state-of-the-art technology, most of the materials used inside the cabin here are in fact plastic. But having said that, it's mostly soft-touch plastic. It doesn't look uncouth. The only thing I will say is that it will probably suffer some wear and tear over the years. Now, aside from that, there are some other cool features. For example, you've got ambient lighting along here, which looks really slick. As for the seats, you can see they actually look really sporty. They're all covered in this sort of artificial leather and are electrically adjustable. Now, you can see behind me I've got this kind of mesh panel for my head, which is great when the car gets hot. And then all of the seats are actually really nicely cushioned and bolstered, which makes long journeys really much more comfortable. I'd imagine if you're in the market for a 7-seater, then it's because you've got a big family to accommodate, and child seats will be making frequent appearances in this car. The EV9 comes with 4 ISOFIX points and 5 top tether points, so can easily accommodate up to 4 small children. Helpfully, the doors open extra wide too, which means you're not having to strain your back when getting little ones in and out. So the second row is actually almost as impressive as the first row, which is great to say because so often the second rows feel like a bit of an afterthought, to be honest. But this feels supersized. I've got these huge windows, loads of legroom, loads of headroom. I'm 171 centimetres for context. And in terms of amenities, you've got cup holders here and here. You have got these roof-mounted air vents, and you've got this secret little storage compartment, which is great for hiding snacks. As is always the case with third rows, I probably wouldn't want to be the person that pulls the short straw and has to sit back here, but you can see it's pretty adequate. This is the amount of space I would have if someone over 6 foot was sitting in front of me. So you can see 2 adults can quite easily sit here in the back comfortably. And there's plenty of amenities. You've got the roof-mounted air vents again, you've got USB-C ports, and you've got cup holders either side of you. Now this is going to be a real test of my memory. When you've got the 2 rows down, and they do go completely flat, you can get a whopping 2,318 litres of boot space. When you've got just the third row down, you have still got 828 litres, and when you've got all 3 rows up, you've still got 333 litres, which I think is really good when you've got 7 bums in seats. This boot is all about convenience. It's got an electric tailgate, and this third row is extremely easy to put down. Ta-da! Also in the back here, you have a 12-volt plug and a 250-volt power outlet, which is great if you're using the car for work or for camping or the such like. Now, unfortunately, the one downside of this boot is that you do not get a full-size spare wheel. You just get a tyre repair kit, which is a bit annoying for a car of this price. If you're enjoying this review, hit the subscribe button so you can stay up to date with all the latest and greatest news and reviews from Drive.com.au. The Earth and the higher spec GT line are both powered by a dual motor 99.8 kilowatt hour lithium ion battery pack, producing a combined power output of 282.6 kilowatts and 700 newton meters of torque. Using a 350 volt fast charger, you can expect to charge the car from 10% to 80% in 24 minutes. In my real world experience, however, I used a 50 volt public charger as there's nothing faster than that locally to me, and it took half an hour to charge 15%, from 60% to 75%. Not particularly practical. But I should call out that over the course of 5 days, I drove 265 kilometres and only used 40% of charge. So if you are relying on slower chargers, then at least you're not having to charge very frequently. So my first impressions driving in the car is that visibility is really good thanks to this really big windshield in front of me. Although because the car is so big, sometimes I feel like I'm straining a bit to look over the bonnet. Now behind me, obviously visibility is a little bit more compromised depending on how many bodies you've got behind you, but there is plenty of safety technology in this car to help you with that. What you will notice though as I'm driving is that safety technology is incredibly intrusive. For example, you are getting beeps and trills wherever you go. Even in a school zone outside of school hours, you're getting loads of buzzing going off, which is really alarming when you're just trying to drive. Now, when the Drive team were reviewing the Air, they found the suspension a little bit harsher, whereas I'm finding in this variant, it's a very smooth drive. The cabin is also really nice and quiet. Not much road noise comes in at all, which makes me feel nice and cocooned whilst I'm driving. However, where I am aware of the car's size, particularly its height and its length, is when I'm just trying to potter around the suburbs. It's nearly 5 metres long, 2 metres wide, and that does make it quite clunky when I'm trying to turn around corners or when I'm trying to back into tight parking spots. Now, there is plenty of safety technology to aid me when I'm in those situations, but even so, it does all feel a little bit precarious, and it doesn't necessarily feel like it's best suited to the suburbs. It feels better suited to nice open roads. So even though it's such a big, heavy vehicle, you wouldn't necessarily know it because it accelerates seamlessly, like so. In fact, it goes from 0 to 100 in just 6 seconds, which is almost as quick as a Megane RS hot hatch. Incredible for a family car of this size. Like a lot of electric cars, this uses one pedal driving, which is a little bit strange if you haven't done it before. It certainly makes slower driving and parking feel a bit jerky, but once you get used to it, it comes naturally. Overall, this feels like a really composed car to drive, and there's certainly plenty of power beneath me. I've already said it feels like it's better suited to big open roads than it does the suburbs, but I dare say that's partly just getting used to the size. Once you've spent some time in the car, I think it would handle around the suburbs just fine. The EV9 has a 5-star ANCAP safety rating. The Earth is fitted with autonomous emergency braking with junction assistance, blind spot warning and rear cross traffic alert, lane keeping assistance, radar cruise control, speed sign recognition, driver fatigue monitoring, a rear view 360-degree camera, and front and rear parking sensors. I can certainly see why the EV9 was the very deserving recipient of the Drive Car of the Year award. Now, what about the Earth versus the Air then? Well, this car does have slightly more range and a bit more power to it, so if you want a bit more oomph underfoot, then this might be the variant for you. However, I think the laundry list of safety and technology in the Air is good enough to convince me that that's as good as any within the EV9 lineup. Now, for me, running costs have been very efficient and Kia has very reasonable servicing prices, so long-term ownership costs really shouldn't be through the roof, but the price of the car in the first place is a lot to get your head around. Having said that, there are of course more affordable EVs in market, but they just don't stack up against the EV9. That's why it is our overall Drive Car of the Year.